Hello fellow fly fishers, this is Lance with Fly Fish Food. I want to show you a version of a very well-known fly, a waltz worm. This one's going to be a variation of a sexy waltz. But before I start tying, I want to tell you a little bit about some of my history with a waltz worm. Being a competition angler, waltz is a very common competition fly, and many of my teammates and friends fish waltz worms constantly, and they catch lots of fish on them. And for whatever reason, the waltz worm for me has been a fly that just never ever works. I never catch anything on it. I can literally show you hundreds of them I've tied over the years in my boxes with copper beads, with gold beads, with silver beads, with pink beads, regular waltz, sexy waltz, with rabbit dubbing, with squirrel dubbing, with every kind of variation of dubbing, with hot thread collars, with CDC collars, and I just don't catch any fish on waltz worms. So that's my confession for the day. Waltz worms don't work. However, I spun this little variation up the other day, and I have actually started catching fish on this one, and I've been guiding with it and have had some of my clients catch fish on it too. So I know this one works for me. There are lots of other versions of a waltz worm that work for lots of other people, but if you're like me and you can't catch fish on a regular waltz and you're challenged as I am, then maybe try this one. This has been a really good one for me. So I've got a Hannock 400 hook in the vise. This is a size 14. And then I've got a Hannock slotted tungsten bead. This is a 3.5 mil. Again, that's a 14 hook with a 3.5 bead. That's to make it really heavy. You could even put a 4 mil bead on here if you want to get really, really heavy, or you could downsize this with a 3 or a 2.5 if you want to make it a bit lighter. So now that we've got that established, let's wrap some thread on here. This is UTC 70 denier in watery olive, and this color I really like because it's not crazy bright when you just wrap it on the hook, but if you put a little UV light on it, you will see that it fluoresces. It has some true fluorescence in the dye. So it's a kind of a subtle way to have a little bit of a hot spot in your fly. Alright, so we've got that thread on the hook, again UTC 70 in watery olive. Next I'm going to add some sulky tinsel in the opal color. Sulky's a tinsel that we sell on our website. It is a little more durable than most tinsels. It's only available in one size, but it has a great range of colors. If you haven't got some of that, I recommend you try some. If for no other reason, to tie this fly, or maybe we use the same sulky on a red dart, for instance. So get you some of that sulky tinsel. So I'm going to tie the sulky and some 7X tippet, any brand you like, doesn't matter, just together right behind the bead. Capture them in, wrap backward with the thread towards the bend of the hook. You'll see this is a really techie fly. And then I'm going to add some dubbing. The dubbing I've got is a mixture, so it's a custom mix. I've got some rainbow sow scud dubbing, and I'm mixing that with some natural hare's mask, just hairline, hare's ear dubbing. So I've mixed equal parts. I've already gone ahead and done that. We mixed them in a coffee grinder. You could just mix them with your fingers, but if you mix it in a coffee grinder, it blends it a little better. Alright, so this is kind of the usual suspect for my flies. This is really easy, and not that I came up with this pattern, because this is in no way my design. This is just a variation on a sexy waltz worm. But this particular one, just like all waltz, is really easy to tie, really simple. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this pre-blended dubbing and twist it on the thread. We want to make a pretty small, narrow dubbing noodle, and it won't take too much of this. Once I've got the dubbing on the thread, we're just going to wrap it up the shank, just making a nice even body. Doesn't have to be perfect, but relatively even, right up to the bead. Nice. Then I'm going to take the sulky tinsel and I'm going to wrap it the opposite direction I wrapped the dubbing, or the opposite direction you'd wrap the thread. So I'm now locking the dubbing in place and just spacing wraps across the fly's body all the way up to the bead. Then we'll capture the ribbing with the thread, tie it off and get rid of it. And now I'm going to wrap the 7X tippet the same direction as my thread, which is the opposite direction I wrapped the sulky. So now we're counter wrapping everything in place here. You can see this makes a really thin body, and the purpose of the monofilament is just to reinforce the entire fly, mostly reinforce the tinsel. You could eliminate that step if you wanted to, but I find the fly lasts a lot longer with any tinsel. They just last longer if you have a little bit of ribbing, a little monofilament, a little wire, something like that through them. I find mono is even more durable than wire. Okay, now that I've got that tied off, I wrapped it all the way to the bead. I tied it off, cut it off. Now I'm just going to whip finish, and I'm going to actually whip finish a couple times to build up just a tiny bit of a thread hot spot. Once we've got that done, we can get rid of the thread. And the last step is to take the trusty old Stonfo Velcro tool and just rough this guy up a little bit. This dubbing's not really coarse, so it's not going to tease out a lot, but it's going to tease out just a little bit, and the Velcro makes that pretty easy. Then we make it a nice little buggy pattern. If some of these are longer than you like, you can come in and trim some of the wayward fibers. Otherwise, I want a little bit of bugginess there, so I'm going to leave most of those intact. That is it. Sexy waltz worm. It's a really simple fly. Silver bead, 14 hook. You could do them in 16s. You could do them in 12s. You can vary the bead size to make them heavier or lighter. Just a really easy guide style fly. Very durable. Gets down well because it's thin. Mix up some of that dubbing and put this one to use on your favorite trout stream.